you understand human psychology. What are we doing in our communities, right? I'm doing that hopefully in a good way. We have a whole community on Mighty Networks, and what a great community to be able to go on there. I flick through and I think, oh wow, look at that, or look at these people, very different people. I don't think we'll get off this topic in a minute. I don't want to talk about Unbreakable all the time, but I don't think our community is like we're all the same. This is how we are.
You're
going to
completely.
see it's a very, I will say, it's a very we don't govern that community.
Well, you have everything from people who are kind of highly successful to people who are struggling to people who are kind of like middle of the road. You get,
living in a caravan, love it.
Yeah.
Millionaires.
Yeah, you've got
different
everything.
goals. But that was the whole idea. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is that is a self-governed community in the sense the community governs itself.
If I went
not
on,
us going, don't do that. It's like,
if I went on to Mighty Networks now and I posted, I'm struggling, I'd get 10 people in every kind of form you can imagine, either saying, are you okay, mate? Do you need some help?
Or we all struggle.
I've had this problem and this is how I dealt with it.
And also if you put your win, oh my God, people are going to go,
They
great.
celebrate it.
And there's not a lot of people sharing information from outside of there. They're sharing their own experiences.
Yeah.
But I think, I want to dive into you about mental health. And I realize I talk about mental health a lot on here, but it's also just because I'm really passionate about mental health. Yeah. And I believe that I love coaching. I say this to you in the coffee shop. I am a coach through and through. I think I've always coached.
You can't help yourself.
No. And I mean, I don't mean if we were sat having coffee, I'd be like, I'm going to coach you. You've got a problem. I've had to learn in my life that I just need to be a friend to people, a partner, a dad. I can't coach everyone. But I love coaching. And I'm passionate about improving mental health in individuals. We were kind of talking, like I said, off camera about, there's many factors in mental health, right? But I think we need to sometimes address that there's a lot of change and unrest on a societal level across, certainly what I see across the UK, for example.
It's so hard to know what's the truth and what's the stuff that you need to worry about and the stuff that you don't need to worry about. It's hard these days. And also, so much information.
I think there's a lot of old mechanisms collapsing, old beliefs collapsing, old ways. There's this kind of wrestling and changing of narratives. Like gender's a big thing if you look at it across.
Yeah.
That I think race seems to be becoming a thing, doesn't it? Currently, as we're recording, this stuff, there's lots of factors that seem to be contributing to this society that has a lot of mistrust in governments, a lot of skepticism, would you say?
Yeah, and I think at the local level, so, over the table, there isn't any issue. No. You could sit next to anybody in any form that they are. In my work, I work with a huge swathe of society across, the LGBT community, various different kind of racial groups, if you want to call them that, and there's never any tension in that local level.
Human to human.
Human to human. As soon as you start grouping everybody, that's when that tension comes in. Because I don't know whether it's a deliberate thing or whether it's just a societal, maybe this has happened across time, because if you think about the history of the world, it's often been groups against groups. It's very rarely, you against your neighbor, because there's no value in it. There's no value in you attacking your neighbor because you live with that person.
My neighbour's got quite a nice house, to be fair.
Well, you want to get on and have it.
So you just throw some ideas up. Yeah. But I know exactly what you're saying. You keep going. Sorry, I shouldn't.
Your community, and I think communities are probably more disparate and more weak and much more spread apart than they used to be. Again, I was reading about this the other day, talking about the average distance between where you would live. So 50 years ago, you would most likely live within 10 miles of where you were born. So there's some kind of like specific number, let's just for now say 10 miles. And you would very rarely stray from that 10 miles. If I think about my grandparents, they were quite, unusual in that they moved around. But for the most part, you stayed in your community. You understood who you were. You had your life was not mapped out, but you could, for the most part, you stayed close to your family and your friends, and you looked after your mum and dad when they got old, and all your kids had their grandparents pretty close by, and unless you were an unusual case. But now, if I think about where I live, it's far apart from my parents, my grandparents are passed, but I would be significantly geographically spread apart because our work is different. We spread all over the place to go and seek our fortunes, essentially. And I think there's always been a bit of that. But, and I've gravitated back towards my family. Having spent 10 years in the military all over the place, I was never less than 100 miles away from my parents at any one time.
It's a really interesting topic. That's why I love talking to you, because you're well-read, you read you research so much. But I wrote about this in my Emmy-winning book. Can you win an Emmy for a book?
Yeah, probably Pulitzer Prize, wouldn't it?
I think it was that. Our worlds are much bigger. I actually used my dad as an example. His world was so much smaller at 20 than a 20-year-old now. The question is our world or our immediate lives better for the extensive amount of information available to us? My dad's level of information was much smaller, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He would listen to the radio. Well, he would have called it the wireless. He didn't have a telly.
No.
And he listened to the boxing on the radio. He walked the fields. He was in the country, so it's a bit different.
Yep.
He went shooting rabbits and, they had a local bobby and he went out in the local town. My dad never went to Ibiza, did he, for a lad's weekend, No. And he worked, he cycled to work. He was a plumber. He left school at 40. Now we look at that and go, oh, because it's almost seen now that if you don't leave your hometown, you've done nothing. What have they ever done? People think that, don't they? Where have they been? What have they done? But are our lives better?
I think it's hard to measure because societally, I've read this a few times in different forms, that we've never had it so good.
Of course.
So from a food perspective, we've never had so much food. We've never had so much health. If you think about the average 40-year-old,
longevity
50 years ago
is from a health perspective is better, yeah.
If you watch a sitcom from the 70s, apart from the racism and sexism, you're going to see people who are in their late 30s who look like they're 80.
It's true. This was a 40-year-old in the 80s. He like
Terry and June,
like that?
They were like in their mid 30s. Can you imagine? With the twin set and pearls, it's not really my thing.
We're much younger.
Yeah.
Than we were. Yeah, there's been huge advancements, hasn't there?
Nobody went to the gym in 1970 other than like athletes,
Yeah, well, when I was say this, when I was growing up, 19, I started going to the gym at 15. So what would I have been? It'd been 2000. Not many young lads went to the gym. Trust, that sounds mad to say that now. Yeah. I mean, it was 24 years ago. But not many young lads went to the gym. Very few young girls went to the gym at 20.
Societally,
it was almost seen like, why the fuck are you in a gym?
Yeah.
You were like, it was full of older bodybuilders and stuff, at the kind of gym I was in.
Yeah.
But now I go to the gym. It's amazing. Lads, girls, fucking training. They're not like, I'm on the cross train for 20 minutes. Like lifting weights, getting lean. You think, that's brilliant, isn't it? Like, to see that.
Yeah, but everything that you have, it comes with a cost. So I look at it and go, well, everyone's in the gym. If you could dig into their brains and ask them the question, why are you doing this?
Well, yeah,
it's not always for those positive benefit reasons. And I think you've got to be really careful.
That's true.
I've got two daughters who are at that point where they're starting to think about their bodies and think about their own reaction to people and how they react to them. And I've heard them say, oh, I'm overweight, or oh, I don't look very good in the mirror. And it's terrifying as a parent to hear your child say something like that, because to you, they are perfect as they are. Now, obviously, we all want to look after ourselves. And so there's such a difficult balance.
It's the intention behind it.
Yeah.
Like all things.
Why are you saying that? Is that friend pressure? Is that you pressure? And I think we all naturally, hormonally, just suddenly hate ourselves after about, the age of 12.
Yeah. Going back to the main point, we started. No, it's good, because going back to the point we started with, though, is that you're saying, well, we now live further away from where we were born. Our worlds have got bigger.
Yeah.
I suppose the thing I'm trying to weigh up all the time in my writing and my thinking, I always say this. Yeah, people seem to think that if you drink 4 liters of water, get out in the sunlight at I love Andrew Huberman, but kind of got a lot to answer for in the narrative of that, because he's like, the optimal amount of sunshine is about 7 minutes, and it's not 7 minutes, and if you breathe the box breathing technique of far, and you do that for approximately 12 minutes of the day, and you've got to do it facing the sunshine with your asshole out, that has been proven to reduce the cortisol levels in your system. But I sound like Andrew Tate now.
I only asshole sunbathe.
Yeah,
that's
of
my
course.
only.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you come to the retreat. We've
exactly.
got the asshole sunbathing session at 11 a.m.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Which is great. Yeah. And I'm taking the mick because he does great work, he does great things. But I think people look at themselves so clinically now, and that the answer to great well-being and performance is like, well, I'm doing all these things. It's like, it's such more of a complex.
The sum of.
He's not saying that's the answer, but we hear it and go, well, if I just do this, my life will, I'll be in the best mental state possible. And all that stuff's good for you. But there must be other factors at play that need dealing with, that are causing the ever climbing.
Sort of
who do you
issue.
know really in your life now that back maybe 20 years ago, people are going to say, well, we didn't talk about it then. Possibly, who knows? But you don't have to move very far now of a conversation like someone who's probably struggled a bit with who they are, how they feel, what's going on in their life, who's got down or anxious or stressed or, to a level that was unmanageable.
Yeah,
not occasionally.
Depressed, essentially.
Like I'm unmanaged. This is unmanageable. I am in a state where my emotions are unmanageable. Why is this happening?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I was a fairly successful young man. I'd been through the military. I was promoted. I did the things that I wanted to do. I went, to places that were dangerous. I saw things, and I still wasn't content with myself. I've always had perhaps and I think it probably comes down to a bit of ego maybe, and maybe a bit of a misunderstanding. I've always wanted that more thing. I think it probably comes from my father. He's a very driven man, and I maybe learnt that was what the way to operate. And I think if you don't meet your own expectations, you can easily slide as a man into a bit of an abyss, because you compare yourself to others. Naturally, you can't help but do that. And when you see successful men in particular, you go, why am I not earning £1 million? What's he done to make that money? How has he got a fabulous looking girlfriend?
I think financial is a big driver for men. It may be for women, I can't speak, but I don't necessarily have that many conversations with women about. I think what we're describing is how we define our sense of self-worth. And we're defining it through financial means a lot.
And no one's, when you go to school, you're not taught how to manage finances. You're not taught to manage your life particularly well. You're just taught a load of stuff that's going to make you a good disseminator and listener to information, and then you can learn and regurgitate. I can sort of see a system where your learning in your early years should be all about how to live your life to the most efficient and most successful kind of outcome. So don't be judging yourself on what others are doing. Choose your own path. If you learn that success isn't rated by how much money or how good looking your girlfriend is, or
you should decide what it is.
Yeah, you should be able to
understand. This is again
that.
what I think is that broad access to information we have now in social media. Going, well, maybe when you're not sure in yourself, do you go, well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe I need to be more like that. Look at that. My dad wouldn't have had that, would he?
Well, I think he would have gone through the 1940s, 50s kind of education system, which was all about recovery from the war. Hugely complex topic. And it didn't really change very much, and it hasn't really changed very much ever since. I mean, I went through, I was born in 76, and went through the early 90s in my kind of later school years. And it's pretty archaic. You're learning geography about, like rivers that have turned left. How important is that to my life? Do I care what an oxbow lake is? Probably not. I still go on about it now.
I was going to say you've been to other areas of the world, but you were usually in extreme situations then, weren't you? I can't imagine you were wandering around taking in the culture, were you?
I don't know. I've seen a few oxbow lakes from helicopters over the years and thought, oh, I know how that formed.
But I think sometimes, I don't think our society is necessarily a very happy society. Or healthy society.
You're probably right.
I don't know it, but I try and read the reports every year by Mental Health UK and you look at them and every year I'm like, wow.
But
that's been my job the last 4 years.
That's in the macro, and it's really hard in the macro to really find real data.
Yeah, of course.
I deal with data a lot, and the macro data, it can be so misleading. You can believe something very easily from the mass of data.
But then when you dial in,
yeah,
and I look at that, so you think, well, what's my world look like? And I suppose my world's a little bit filtered in a sense in the work I do. So you're coming across it more. There's a huge percentage where we don't seem as happy as a society, where stress seems to be higher.
I think the pressures are probably higher now than they were in the past. And I don't mean that like if you came through World War II, you weren't under pressure. My goodness.
It's different though, isn't it?
Yeah, but you didn't then, you didn't have the same financial pressures. The likelihood of you having consistent, stable work was much more likely. Yes, I'm not saying it's in any way it was easier in those days, because it's easy to look back and go, oh, well, that was easy. But
different.
It's different.
It's different.
But you had more chances of stable work that you would, and most people stayed in one job for their life. I know quite a few people that did that. They went through their career and never changed once because they didn't need to. They had pensions and a future. And I think some of that's been stripped away.
In an ever-change, this is kind of the point we're trying to make. You touched the point of education. In a world that is bigger, it's bigger now.
Way bigger.
Like I said, a 20-year-old now has a bigger world than my dad at 20.
Horizons are completely different.
A 30-year-old now has a bigger world than when I was 30. So we've got a bigger world, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've got a faster moving world probably in the stream of information. But are our skills changing to adapt, to deal and navigate?
And that's what you'd want to see. Like in a progressive society, you'd say, right, okay, things have changed. We've got the internet. I can find out what happened in, Antarctica within the hour.
Yeah.
30 years ago, you had to wait for the boat to rock up 6 months later before you found out what had happened. Maybe not 30 years, but certainly 50 years.
And this brings me back to something I will say. I think information's cheap now, for the most part.
It sort of washes over you eventually, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like we can get access pretty much any information about anything within reason.
Yeah.
Whereas you couldn't access that information 20, 30 years ago, could you? But are we better off for all that information?
Not all of it. It's hard to say whether that information availability is a real problem. I think it may cause specific hotspots where if you find out something that perhaps you don't know the full context to, somebody could say something and you can find it out. I mean, it's happening in Britain right now. People are taking things out of context. They're finding misinformation and not understanding that it is misinformation.
Well, the thing is, your brain will always find the information to back up what you are
That's
asking it to back
self-validation.
up. Yeah, of course. I think information is a big problem in mental performance and health and well-being, shall I say, because not all information is relevant to the individual at the time. Not all information is accurate. Not all information is useful. So if you're out there going, oh, I've got this problem, and we start Googling, we start looking, and then I always say this, you click on some things on Facebook, Instagram, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe you delve into that problem, but you're not really delving into the problem, it's surface level. Maybe I should try that. Yeah. And then because you're clicking on it, you're getting more of it. So more of it's streaming in. Maybe I should try that.
Yeah.
I wrote a post about this. It's like, someone sort of said, oh, well, all the information's out there. What does your academy do, for example? Yada, yada. There's tools everywhere. I said, yeah, well, I likened it to cooking. So the thing is, I cook every Saturday. Well, most Saturdays. And I have this little ritual. Go to the gym, sauna, steam, come home, I'm cooking. And I pick some, I get the Waitrose magazine on a Friday. The free magazine.
So posh.
I'm so posh now. Mark, can you believe it? I am posh now. And I am...
You've changed.
I have, yeah. And I go in, I like it. I go get a coffee on a Friday morning. I coach all day on a Friday, literally all day. And I get this paper. It's free. It's got all it's brilliant marketing.
It's not free, it's really expensive.
What they're trying to do is they've got all the recipes in there for the weekend.
Yeah.
It's great marketing. I read it. I'm like, fucking hell, that looks amazing. I go back to Waitrose. I buy all the ingredients. So I buy the ingredients. What I love about it is I buy the ingredients, I follow the recipe, I don't change it, I cook the meal, it tastes half decent. We go, this is nice, isn't it? Lovely meal. Yeah, yeah. Boom. And I eat it and I'm done.
It's like a dopamine thing there as well, though, isn't it? Because you've followed a process. You've taken a raw ingredient and made a thing.
What most people are doing is scrolling the internet, accumulating ingredients for a great life. They might not make a great recipe, but all that. Oh, I should try that. The 20 hacks from Andrew Huberman. Oh, fucking hell, Jay Shetty says this. Or Simon Grimm says that. I'll put myself in that bracket. Yeah, Charles says this. Or my friend says that. And we're just accumulating.
Yeah, constant overflow of information.
And then we go, I've got to put this into my life somehow. It's like, well, that probably makes a really shit recipe.
It was one of the first things.
It makes a shit meal, mate.
It was one of the first things you taught me. It was to simplify my life. You didn't say stop reading the news, but what you said was, here's what happens to you when you read the news.
Yeah.
And you explained to me that all of the things that, let's say, trigger you, all the things you're worried about will be magnified. Your brain will focus on the patterns that it wants to focus on, and you'll end up in an overwhelm.
But if you went to a gym and said, I'm fucking out of shape, mate, I'd say, right, I haven't trained for 20 years. Right, let's have a look at this. You need to start here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to progressively guide you towards your goal here. But we can't do the stuff at the end now because, you're a fat mess, mate. Imagine just a bloke who's 10 stone overweight. We can't do that. Let's just focus on what you need right now.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't keep doing that because after a while you'd be like, I'm not getting anywhere. Of course not. I talk about this a lot, but I still think I'm not doing a good enough job of articulating it in the media, social media, because people still don't quite get it. I think we're addicted to accumulating things. It's like, yeah, but I've got 500 rituals here. It's like 95% of your rituals are fucking irrelevant to you right now. And that's why you're not doing anything.
I mean, what I do now as a routine is entirely different from how it started out 4 years ago when I first started.
And as you progress, you should drop elements of your routine. And like I said, if I write a program in High Performance Mind now for somebody, like writing for you and that, I'm like, where's he at? Okay, you first come in, you might be a bit burnt out, we'll work on that. Then it's like, oh, this has come up. It's like, okay, you need this step.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're getting when you're just absorbing information. You're not getting, for example, would I do shadow work with an individual who just walked through the door? You're like, fuck me, you've got some self-worth issues. Let's do shadow work. It's like, oh my God, you can barely function. That's just going to implode you. You're going to end up down a rabbit hole. So it's relevant, accurate information. I think that's where the world is so big and we've got so much information. We're relying on ourselves to sieve it for the most relevant and we just can't. So we just keep accumulating.
Yeah. I'm probably guilty of that. I've read every kind of book you can imagine before I started out on this kind of actual action route of taking action and speaking to people like yourself. And going on that journey of, right, okay, I've read all the books. I know why I'm unhappy, or I think I know why I'm unhappy. Why am I not doing the things that I should do to make myself happier?
Okay. Did you find, coming back to something you said earlier, that your external reference point for what was successful possibly and your view of yourself was so mismatched?
Very much so.
That conflict created a huge amount of unhappiness.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of, I'm sure this is probably familiar for a lot of men. I went through my 20s. Let's say I came out of as a teenager. I was a bit underconfident. I don't know why. I was playing semi-professional sport by the time I was 16. I was playing for the county, and then I joined the RAF and I played rugby for them. And I should have been I was doing all these physical actions.
Jock.
I was a jock, but I didn't have the confidence that was required to take that kind of physical action and make it a positive mental journey. And it's a really, really interesting tale because I spent that early part of my life hugely underconfident. And it's taken many, many years to find my own, what am I,
I think that's what am I? I think not all mental well-being is, there's so many facets to it. I talk about this all the time. It's like, what's the one thing? It's not one thing.
No.
But if we're having a different conversation around it today, you're like, okay, there's a lot of stuff. Society is changing, I think, in my time. There's a lot of unrest, a lot of mistrust. I think COVID has a huge amount I think we're coming out at the back end of that still, dealing with a lot of the issues that happen there, the isolation, the mistrust, the doubt that people have in government structures, all these different things. We're coming out the back end of that. People are definitely more mistrusting.
I think it's changed.
More skeptical.
Yeah, it's changed the way we view government. It's changed the way we view health authorities. It's changed the way we view a lot of authority because we don't see them being a benign force in our lives.
And also as a force of possible stability.
Yeah.
And that's the point I was kind of coming to. It's like when you have belief in structures, it creates, for many of us, a sense of stability in our life, doesn't it? I believe that if I didn't trust whether gravity was going to work every day, I'd be quite...
You'd be anxious, wouldn't you?
I'd be quite anxious about life, wouldn't I? Like, fuck me, I just trust that we're going to stay on this planet somehow. I don't understand it. And that's a silly example, and we all have routines that generate a level of certainty. But when you start questioning the bigger things in life, which is what religion did for a lot of us, it gave us answers and certainty in
it was
things
surety.
that were unanswerable.
You knew that if you were a good person, the church told you were going to go to heaven and ascend.
I'm probably go to heaven. Oh, wow, that solved that big mystery about what happens to me.
Don't have to worry about
I have a level of certainty now. So as all these things start collapsing, I think it creates uncertainty. It's quite a deep conversation, this, but I'm enjoying it. It creates I can't see Mark anymore. He strategically put his camera. It's like a right pervert over there. He's got his cap down. Side-eyeing me. But it creates a level of certainty, I think.
Yeah.
That maybe we don't have. And that creates unrest. I know you're going to talk. And that creates anxiety. That creates stress. And how am I to trust the man over the road and his intentions now? You know, back in the day, they say, Lee Evans, I'd leave the fucking front of the house off in my day. No one would nick anything. Leave it all in the front garden. Now it's like, everyone's like, lock your doors. Fucking like, why are we mistrusting our general
But it's so easy to fall into that narrative that everything is scary and everything's a risk and that the world's out to get you. I did it myself. I was a victim for many, many years. You know, I always believed that everything was out to get me. And if the young people coming through today, if they could be shown a pathway that was not everything is out to get you. Life will life you. You're going to get handed some challenge. And here's a process, a set of processes that will teach you how to deal with it. You know, because you know, by holding someone's hand through every single thing, you rob them of their independence. You take away their ability to free think, to respond to a problem in a creative way. You know, and I see it in young engineers who are incredibly intelligent, you know, far more intelligent than I, you know, and yet their life experience has been a rinse and repeat exercise without any real challenge.
And you don't get the feedback.
No.
I'm a big, again, this is another aspect. I think if we're talking about mental health as a topic, anyone tuning into our stuff is probably going to be interested in mental health.
Yeah.
Society has a huge part to play. The structures we've looked at for certainty and almost can rely on, I don't think people necessarily are certain and rely on. I think there's mistrust in our brothers, you know, our general human beings. Not everyone, but there is an element of that. You hear it all the time.
If you only focused on the things that are reported negatively, you could easily believe that the guy next to you, whatever color, creed,
he's out to get you,
whatever sexuality he is or she is, whatever they are, you could believe they were a negative force. When you meet someone that's genuinely positive, and you know, like someone like Arjuna, who has gone on his journey of becoming a monk, whenever I speak to him, I'm always like, whoa, you know, how can you be so? It's like here and now,
glowing yellow sun coming out of him.
Yeah. It's simultaneously incredible but frustrating. You know, I want to be you, but I don't know if I could get there.
You are right that if we focus on the negativity. And I think that has a massive impact. If you look at a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, you're bound to be anxious and stressed when you aren't certain in life anymore and how it works. I think that is a huge proponent.
And for a lot of those people, they don't have, you know, if everybody could come through the academy, for instance, and see.
I like how many plugs you're putting in for our academy.
I'll talk about it. I'll talk about that endlessly to you know, pretty much everybody, much to their boredom. But you know, I explain that, you know, it's not just about one specific methodology, let's say, But if you can be shown things, shown tools, shown ways of thinking, challenged in your perceptions and challenged in your beliefs, and have that done to you at an early stage in your life, I think society itself will be way better.
Yeah, and I think that comes down, I love this topic because you've touched on something I truly believe, which is allowing people to have the freedom of their own experience. Like you said, if you're wrapped in cotton wool in your journey in life and you're never really having the experiences, of course I'd never want to see anyone. If I could help, you'd go and help them. But we take it to the extreme. It's like, oh, they don't feel very well, I must take that away from them.
Yeah.
And it's so hard with kids, isn't it?
Living in your pain is actually a really key skill. You're going to get pain. I've had more pain than the average, from injuries and incidents and things that I've put myself out there
and
for.
Mental through your
and
jobs.
Mentally, through my own kind of inability to deal with things and.
But we also rob people of confidence when they never have to figure shit out for themselves. That's a big part of my coaching. I always say this. I'm like, look, if you want to be spoon-fed and be rescued every 5 minutes, I ain't for you, because I'm going to let you swim a bit.
But you've
had that.
Yeah. And you've challenged me on a number of occasions where I've never thought that guy's a dick. I've always
probably have.
Well, no, it's funny because, when you're in dark times, and you've been through some fairly dark times with me, and, very, very personally and very individually, you challenge perceptions and beliefs, and it's so easy to believe your own hype. It's so easy to believe wrong narratives. It's so easy to believe things that maybe aren't true, and you can just, because your mind's so incredibly complex, it's constantly trying to come up with ways to kill you, I think.
Well, it's certainly it's a complex thing.
It's a bloody complex thing, and it's so difficult to navigate all that. And I think if you've got somebody like, if I could give anybody any advice to, if they were struggling with a thing, is not to seek the somebody else to do it for you. It's to find that method to either help you do it yourself or overcome it with someone's help. Don't rely on others to do things that you can do.
Well, the thing is, most of the problems we have in life are daily, weekly, month. They come back in the work we do. In performance, getting to perform at your best, getting people out of the shit. It's not like you go, okay, well, here's that thing, it will solve that. That will probably never happen again. So if somebody's always solving the problem for you, and the next time it comes up, you don't know how to solve it.
You don't have the tool set in your brain.
And you don't have the experience. No. Whereas if you say, well, here's this, go use it. That's a big part of I love to coach that way. I'm like, and I do it intentionally. Here's this topic, go try it out. And I know you're probably going to get it a bit wrong, people. But and I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's not bad. But actually, I would do, maybe you should consider this, this, and this. And like, oh, yeah. When you allow people to try things, they come back with questions through experience. So you can tell they're trying to put it in their life. Yeah. They're asking these questions about this, and they've come across obstacles. Then you coach. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you free them.
Now I'm coaching on the obstacles and how to put it in.
Yeah.
But I think allowing people their own experience is huge. I mean, you talk about parenting. Ari is 4. I want to ride my bike, no stabilizers. I'm like, 4's quite young for no stabilizers, I think. Just turned 4.
Yeah, it's probably the borderline.
Yeah. I'm like, it's quite young. I was like, mate, okay. I don't want you to help me. Right.
Okay, boy.
It's like, mate, you're going to need some help. Like, he was getting straight. His mum would be pushing him along by his seat. Don't hold on to me. And honestly, I looked at him about 2 weeks ago and I was like, fucking hell, I don't know what nursery must think of this. His legs are black, but he would not let you help him, which is weird in a way, a little bit. But then he's like, I must do it on my own.
Yeah.
But he can ride his bike now.
Yeah.
He can ride it up the road and he can turn and he can steer. And I don't think he would have learned that quickly if I was by him, because I know I'd be like, oh, no, don't do that. I'd be thinking, please don't fall off your bike. Please don't fall off your bike. I mean, he's safe.
Yeah.
But he's learning through experience.
I think you put yourself out there, when you're very young like that, you don't have the fear. You've never hurt yourself. So
put your helmet on, son.
Yeah.
We know.
We know.
Here's another thing about kids as well. You talk about skills. I would keep drilling it into him. I'm like, mate, you need to ask questions. Not, I want this. I said, you need to ask questions. So this is a big thing in our house. It's like, is that a question? But the trouble is, he went to me, Daddy, what is a question? And you go,
have some of that, mate.
I don't know how to describe that to you. I don't know what a question is.
Well, it's supposed
How
to.
do you explain what a question is?
Yeah.
I had to Google it. I was like, it's when you say something to elicit a response that gives you information.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. A
But
question is.
I think that's complex for a 4-year-old. Here's an example. Don't tell me I want, say, can I? If I say no, ask me another question. It's this big thing because I want him to be able to communicate.
That question in loop is fascinating, and that's exactly what most engineers are taught. When they go through their processes,
Just to question things.
Yeah, you say, I'm being told a piece of information here. Do I A, genuinely believe it? That's the first question I ask myself. Do I believe that?
Like Socratic.
Yeah, Socratic method. You say, right, is that information valid? And there's so many times, and it can be big things, it can be tiny little things. If you're doing something that needs facts to function, questioning those facts is really important because, if you work in healthcare, or you work in medicine, or working on airplanes, whatever it might be, if you're not a questioning person and you blindly believe what you're shown or told, you will find yourself in the shit at some point.
Well, let's just lead this back to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
With the amount of information available, is it important that we build lenses to filter that through? We just believe what we hear very often, don't we? Everything on social media is true now.
Mm.
I mean, I look at some of the stuff out there for mental well-being or mental performance. I look at it and go, that's shit. What you've just written is just not, it's not actually true, so to speak, or not how that works. But there's 5,000 likes and people going, oh my God, yeah. You think, well, actually, it's probably going to lead you down a real shit place if you crack on like that.
You can easily, once you identify what people's weaknesses are, you can easily pander to them. You could come on a podcast or something like this, and you could focus on a group of people that have got a specific issue, and you could feed them and feed them and feed them until they can't gorge anymore because their brains are desperate for that pattern recognition and information. And you taught me all this stuff. I'm just regurgitating. Well,
not quite as eloquently as that.
No, but you're regurgitating this. I'm regurgitating your teachings and Dave's teachings and all that. But it's not what you need to do. The right thing is not to do that.
It's Socratic questioning. I can't remember what is the 3 questions, the method of Socratic questioning. It's something.
I can't remember the
exact can I Google it on while I'm on here, Mark? What is Socratic questioning? But it's quite useful.
Other search engines are available.
No, I'm sponsored by Google.
Oh, are you?
Yeah. Socratic questioning from past, it's the method of communication where someone intentionally challenges others, such as students, through open-ended questioning. What are examples of it? Why did you say that? What do you mean by that? How does this relate to our discussion? I guess from a teaching point of view. What are the 4 stages of?
This is a whole podcast on its own.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty sure.
But ideally, it's one of the best statements I was given in anything was, don't just read what you believe and don't always believe what you read.
Absolutely.
I've learned that in coaching immensely, where you go, well, this is what the textbooks, this is what I was taught about coaching and that. But now I'm working with hundreds of people a month and some of it doesn't fucking stack up through experience.
You're in the test and trial. Yeah. You're in the test and trial. And it's fascinating for you because if you think about the amount of human experience that you come across, everything from your millionaire to your dustbin man who's struggling.
Yeah.
And you're like, I know I'm grouping people by their wealth. That's not the way that you should group people. But
yeah, but I see what
the human experience is vast and you're seeing those people usually at a low moment or a moment where they need some clarity or some guidance.
Yep.
And you're working out by test and trial what works for you to coach them to make them kind of better.
That's different for different people.
Yeah.
Principles stack up. But you probably know, I remember us saying to you, we've laid out the unbreakable path. Something like 50 challenges across 3 levels and steps and things in an order to get a specific result. Now, I don't think that exists anywhere else in
Probably
personal
not.
development to that level with real people, with coaches. Not, I'm giving you a step. It's like you're following this step-by-step system. It's almost so we can get a, what's the word? Like testing. If you were to test it, you go, no, everyone's going through the exact same steps.
Yeah.
In the same order.
You're all doing the step 1A, B, B, C, D.
And, you think, well, this should work here, this should work there. By my best guesstimate, the first pass at it, you start running people through it and you realize, okay, that didn't work there. Well, they fall off there, or this doesn't work here, or people struggle with that, or we can't do that because of this individual. And you're getting the feedback, you're adjusting, aren't you?
Yeah, test and adjust is probably the most efficient method for any kind of system. You know?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering sometimes when we take information in, are we just believing this should work, or are we testing it for a period of time and going, hang on a minute, is this really working for me?
Exactly what happened to me. I took that first kind of, I suppose, your early teachings. I'm not the only mentor I've had. And I took those early teachings and I absorbed them, and some of it worked for me and some of it really didn't.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly good at routine.
Yeah.
I really struggle with routine.
But we gave you a small section of it. Yeah. It's like, but some people fucking love routine, and you're trying to get them away from it a little bit. You're like, you need to get away from so much routine, mate. But it's finding that little, like you said, but it's a broad, like, I will say this, is like we hit people with loads of different angles, and they'll find what sticks and they'll keep it if we're testing, adjusting, and having our experience. But with the amount of information available online, I think we're just taking it as, okay, that is, that must be, there's some fundamental things that you can't say, well, drinking water doesn't work for me.
No.
So no,
you'd be dead, mate.
It works for everyone. Come on. But I'm a big fan of that. Not all things are solved with a solid morning routine.
No, I agree with that.
You go, I've got money stresses. I've got relationship stresses. I've got an identity crisis. I think if you're looking at mental health, how much does a crisis of identity and no amount of fucking sea dipping is solving your crisis of identity? I see it with particularly women when kids fly the nest. I see it with people when they change jobs. I see it when people give up jobs. I see it in people when they experience grief. I see it in people when I can feel it in myself. I was talking about it to Mark Ellis on here, getting towards 40, where I start to go, oh, I was the young buck at one point, rocking around here. Like
we've all been there.
Well, I'm the older chap here now. I'm starting to be one of the older chaps in that. Someone said to me the other day, a young lad, which is a compliment. We were talking about training. He's like, mate, you're looking, in the sauna. I said, oh, you're chatting away. I said, well, mate. He said, what's all that mobility stuff you do in there? I said, oh, just joking around. I said, well, you're getting old, got to keep my stuff. He said, how old are you? I said, well, I'll be pretty 40 soon. Fucking hell, mate, you look good for 40.
Yeah.
And you're like, but I took it as a compliment, but also I'm like, he's like 40's old. Well, you got to remember. I can see it in his mind frame. And he's like, I'm no longer this 30-year-old, like, younger man in the gym. I'm one of the probably older men. Not the oldest blokes, the fucking instructor in there. He was in the military, I think. Well, I know he was. Must be late 60s. He is fit as a fiddle, mate. He is shredded. But again, it's that identity. When our identity changes, or there's a crisis in who we are. And this is what I mean about society. I think sometimes it's happening particularly to men because the view of men is changing in society. Me and my friend were talking about this. Like, I have a lot more, and I'm not saying this is bad, but I have a lot more to do with my kids than probably my dad did.
Yeah, completely.
It's like, like I am responsible for a lot more of the care. I'm not saying that's bad, but that's changed, doesn't it, over time, a view of what a man is and how a man operates, the modern man, etc. And I think there's some people stuck on old programs with there's this clash with who I am. What am I? When you become a dad, it's a massive identity shift.
Yeah, I mean, there's a base programming, I think, in all of us as men, particularly when you become a parent, that you become that presence that provides things.
Yeah.
And for instance, a lot of my battles over the years has been when challenges happened and life has happened to me individually, and I've not been able to provide. And it's a massive problem for a lot of men and women. But
identity,
I lost my identity for many months, many years even. I didn't know who I was and why I was there.
And that's why I think it's constant reinventing who you are. I've worked with people who've been very wealthy, built businesses, sold them, very important people who are no longer important the moment that business is gone. And you're like, who am I? Where am I going? What is my life about? Because I used to be this, and now I'm not anymore. it must happen to parents who give up work and things like that. And you're like, God, I used to, now I'm this. And some people happily take these identities, they roll with them. But I think a huge element of mental unrest is a crisis of identity and a view of our self-view.
All the people that I've ever met and I've wondered at them and said, oh, wow, I'm really impressed by this person. They've all had some common mission. I use the word mission because that's just one that came to mind, but they've got a purpose, and it can be something completely uninterested in finances. It can be something like helping people. It can be, changing the world environmentally. It can be, those people, when you meet them and you meet a truly engaged individual who has this inner requirement to help or to fix or to kind of, generate positivity, whatever it might be. When you meet them, you can't help but be towed along by their kind of the wake, I suppose. And as a naturally negative person from a very young age, and I wonder whether there's a genetic component. I don't know, but I've often struggled with that. And when I meet somebody who's like uber positive, well, as I said, I've worked with Olympic athletes. I was only a small part of their journey, but when I met them, I'd never really met people who had that level of absolute focus,
But they were driven by a clear goal in that.
They wanted to be the best.
And it's like, we look at that, I don't want to be an Olympic athlete. What can I be driven by? But I think it's building a life out of what you value.
Find your purpose, and you can't really go wrong.
It doesn't have to be solving the world famine, does it? Sometimes it's like, my purpose right now is to raise my kids and do this and do this. And this is where I'm getting great value from, and et cetera, et cetera.
You can think about it. And I think one of the exercises we did, that I did a few years ago, was mapping out this kind of vision, if you want to call it the vision. And it's the first time I'd ever really written down what I wanted in life.
But that's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why are we not taught that at school?
Yeah.
Why do they not go, and we're a bit young, possibly. I don't think you need to go, what do you want out of life? But imagine if someone went, maybe they do this, but what do you want out of school? What would you love your school experience to be like? Map it out. What would you like to do?
Yeah.
Imagine having that conversation with a 13-year-old. I don't think we do. We just, what job do you want to do when you're older? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do this weekend. I don't know I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. But it's not one and done. It's not, I've done my idea of who I am and what I want, and now that's set in stone, because your experiences happen, life changes, and it's like, well, it's a constant sharpening. Sometimes it's a complete fucking reversal, smash it up and start again of, who am I? What do I value?
Yeah.
What do I want from my life? Who's important to me? Let's build something.
Yeah, and I think that, when I first did my first vision mapping exercise was on the first retreat I came on with you and Ben. And Ben was like, he was sort of strutting around in the room as he does. And he kind of came over to me, and I looked up at him, and I had this piece of A3 paper in front of me, and I was like, my mind was blank. And I was sat next to a chap who was similarly blank. We were both looking at each other. We had these felt tip pens, and we're like looking at each other and go, what do you write?
Yeah, what do you write down?
I thought, there's no way I can capture what I want, because A, I don't actually know right now, and B, what do I write? And Ben said, well, what's the most core thing? And I started writing. I started these little bubbles, and I was writing down, what do I want? And I at the time, at that point, I was a year or two into the journey with yourselves, and I wasn't happy in my career, and I wanted to change, and I wanted a bit more financial stability. And so those were practical things that I could focus on. I didn't think anything philosophically. I didn't want to change the world in any great way. I just wanted to be better as a person, and be better for my family as well, because I'd been letting them down in a number of ways. I knew that I wasn't the father I'd like to be. I knew that I wasn't happy, and I knew that I wasn't content, and that was transforming areas of my life in a bad way. So that, just writing that down, I've still got it. It's in my workshop. And it's
probably changed as well.
Oh, it's massively changed.
I think that sometimes we have more control over the direction of our life than we like to think. But we have to find the courage, which is what it is sometimes, to at least explore and admit what we want. And I was thinking about this. I love lyrics, but I was playing Always Remember Us This Way by Lady Gaga because, I'm an emotional soul like that. But there's this little lyric in there. It's like, it's buried in my soul like California gold. She's talking about a person.
Okay.
But I thought, and because I'm big on releasing past experiences and stress, and a lot of stress is stored up in us. It's like, we all bury shit in our soul, don't we? It sounds a bit, grandiose, but we bury stuff down. Dreams, hopes, people maybe, past traumas. We bury them down there. And I think sometimes the reason we don't get clear on what we want, it's not like, oh, let's write down what I want, there it is. Sometimes you have to really get clear. But sometimes it's just having the courage to say, what is it I really want? Like, honestly, if what sort of life do I want to live? And I think sometimes we don't put it out there because we think, well, when we put it out there, what if we don't get it? It's easier to just to pretend we don't know what we want.
Yeah, and ultimately, once you start taking responsibility for your own life, it can be quite a scary place, because many of us, and I've been guilty of this in the past and probably still am, want to be led.
Yeah, of course.
Because, sometimes life is damned hard.
Maybe that's why we have so much unrest on a more macro level in society. We're like, who is leading?
And if you're waiting for a government to fix your personal lack of like, let's say, a vision, then you're not going to get it. And it's important that you take responsibility for your own pathway. And if that pathway takes you on a journey of discovery where you find out that you want to change the world, so be it. It could be that you just want to be a really good, employee at some particular thing. You might want to run your own business.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
You might want to live in the country in a hut. You might want to live in the city in a skyscraper, in a penthouse. But everyone's individual and everyone has these unique things. But if you roll back this whole subject, we're not talking about mental health in a sense of, well, it's good to get some sleep. Everyone knows this.
Oh, that's basic stuff.
I'm looking at stuff like, wow, for me now, I'm looking outside of it and saying, okay, what are the environmental factors at play? A lot of information, a lot of unrest that impacts people. A lot of the stressors, individual stresses that people have, could be relationship problems. What are the skills that we lack in relationships? Communication.
Virtually the whole problem for most people who, have that comms issue.
It's comms, isn't it? In workplace, often it's communication. It's like you've got to be able to speak your truth, so to speak. And a huge amount of stress is not saying what you need to say, not making decisions you need to make. And then so not only have you got external stresses like finances and all the rest of it, there's this identity crisis. We're like, who am I? But I think we don't ask, this is one thing I would say, we don't ask, who am I? What do I value? We almost ask, who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to value? That's what I think a lot of us build visions of. Well, this is who you're supposed to be as a male or a female. This is what you're supposed to value in society. So now, what do I value? And maybe that goes against the grain.
Yeah, I would imagine that some people would look at it as selfish by analysing your hopes and dreams and coming up with a very specific kind of vision for yourself and for your family, whatever it might be. They could look at that as being selfish, because you're not.
And maybe it is.
Yeah, it could well be. But everyone needs a sense of their self,
Well, of course they do. And, I think a lot of people feel repressed in many ways, but we're repressing ourselves a lot.
Yeah.
So just be open and honest about the kind of life you want to live. Put it out there.
I mean, I probably wear my heart on my sleeve more than most. I don't know whether that's just genetics or what, but I'm usually, you can tell if I'm unhappy and you can tell if I'm happy. I'm not a very reserved person. I think like you're probably a bit more reserved than I am. It's hard to know whether you're in a great place or in an okay place.
Where am I now today?
I don't know. I'm looking pretty sexy.
I'm in a sexy place. That's where I am. So, my ejaculate was like a river.
You might have to cut that bit out.
No, keep that bit in. My ejaculate from Burgundy. What did it do, Mark? The ejaculate? I can't hear.
It was a river.
The river Pompeii. Yeah. Good old anchor man. What a thing. But I think that when we look at these, I think we got to look outside. A lot of people are like, oh, I've got my routine. I'm drinking my water. Why am I still unhappy? It's like, look at your idea of who you are and where you're going, your identity. Look at the biggest stressor in your life. What skills don't you have there? How can you solve it? What do you need to improve? All these things make up well, is it complex, but the interconnectedness.
It's an interplay between all those factors. I mean, like my biggest thing when I first came to you was I had a lack of confidence in myself, and it was affecting me in loads of ways. Like I couldn't make enough money, for instance. And
exactly. And also, you touched upon you went through times of depression. Mm-hmm. Well, I imagine you weren't depressed because you weren't having a sauna 3 times a week, although I love that. There must have been multiple factors at play that were causing that. I'm sure there was environmental factors. I'm sure there was life factors. I'm sure there was a little conflict in who you were. And I'm sure all those things were playing.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
It's piecing those things together. And I wrote, I think it came out today. Let's have a look. Did I write something the other day and I was like, Amber, we need to put this out. But sometimes I'll write things and I think is absolutely incredible. And
getting profound in your old age.
Yeah, I was having a chat. It's about mental health. And I just think it's a lack of skills. In fact, it's really popular. That is crucial. We need to upskill people, upskill young people.
Yeah, and I genuinely believe that it should be a huge component of education. I suppose, if you're cynical, you could say, well, what is education? Education is training you to become is it training you to become an employee, an unquestioning employee? Maybe it is. That was certainly what education was formalized in the 1900s, because they wanted a class of people that were going to compliantly be good employees. And maybe that's changed a bit now because the nature of work's changed. The nature of people has changed. Information flow is huge. But, I really strongly believe that, like, if your education system isn't giving you the skills to live a full and rich life, then, are families giving you that? Probably not, because generationally, none of us were trained to do it. Unless you've gone through this process with a mentor or you've gone on a journey.
It's very hard. I think about this a lot, and it's like, how do you ensure good mental well-being of your family? And it's like, well, you have to display it, really. And you can't teach it, I don't think. And I also think, from my experience of teaching anyone anything, people don't like to be taught, especially people that you're not a teacher, you're a parent. So they're going to believe what somebody else says.
Yeah, that's nature.
So, and yes, we're not knocking teachers or education, far from it. It's like, there should be some fundamental things in play, I think. Whereas I think a lot of it's awareness. I think that's the big shift I'd make. It's like, are you building skills or are you giving awareness? They're different things.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like we're making everyone aware about anxiety. It's like, yeah, no wonder it's fucking shooting through the roof. Give them tools for the opposite. Make them aware of calm. Make them aware of health. Yeah. Make them aware of well-being. Like, channel our focus into skills that build that, as opposed to awareness of that.
I think if you could kind of have a blueprint for a human being,
typical engineer.
Yeah, if you could codify it and make it a thing, what would your perfect human being be? That person would be a relaxed, calm, positive individual who had a mission of some kind, internally or externally, and who was
solid sense of who they are,
content with their own life. They would have, they would be rich in their own way. Yeah. Doesn't have to be rich physically. You could be rich in your own way. If you could blueprint that person, you'd want every kid that, for instance, came out of school to be close to that blueprint. And if everybody was in that way, obviously you're going to get exceptions, people who are mentally ill or whatever.
And also their own programming from a young age and stuff like that.
And you're going to get people who experience horrible things. I've met a few people that have been through some terrible things, and you think, my goodness, how have you navigated to this point without surrendering to it?
Yeah, no, it's crazy what people go through. Yeah, but like you said, if you were to go, okay, we need, like national service. No, if we were going to like train somebody through young adulthood, to be a happy, healthy individual,
like a essentially a beacon for each and another.
Yeah, you'd say, well, what sort of things do you want them? Yeah, you'd want them to have a healthy sense of who they are, an individualism, a happiness with who they are and their individual traits. And, you want them to be able to get clear on the kind of future they want. You'd want them to be able to let go and make peace of the past, wouldn't you? You'd want just little skills. And I'm like, maybe not learning about rivers, but as well as that.
Oxbow lakes are pretty important.
And that's like you said. So it's like, I'm not knocking that subject. That's great. But if we're doing that and we're not doing stuff like that.
You should call this episode Oxbow Lakes.
The one about lakes.
This is all about the lakes.
But it is true, isn't it? It's like, well, when you think about it deep down, you're making me think now, you see. It's like, well, I will say to people, what is this? So why do you do that? So why do you get up and do that? Well, because, what's the purpose of your routine, for example? So what's the purpose of something, Well, it wouldn't be hard, surely, to fit half hour in a week where you just went, right, we're going to do this today. I don't know.
I've noticed, when my kids are coming through primary school and early years of comp at the moment, and there's much more focus on what they call PSHE, I think they call it now, which is health and environment and all that. And, the kids are still horrified by the sex ed lessons. Every time I mention that to them, they kind of grimace and curl into themselves like they're all kind of what's-its. It's quite funny. But, I'm sure that there's much more focus on well-being and mindset and all of that health stuff than there ever was in my days. In my days, it was like, are you all right, lad? You've just broken your leg on the football field or whatever. And they just sort of drag you into the changing rooms and kick you back into class.
Put their foil blanket on you.
Yeah, foil blanket, you're having a laugh. No such thing in those days.
What were you born in the 40s? Yeah. Back in my day, boy.
Foil hadn't been invented.
No foil. But no, you are right. There's fundamentally got to be more time spent on it. I'm sure somebody's watching this going, no, I'm in school. We spend more time on that. And that is great, isn't it?
But ask the questions. If you're young and you've got the capacity, ask the questions. Ask your parents. If they can't answer and they don't understand what you're asking them, then maybe that opens a question in their lives. Maybe they go and ask themselves a question. That's where it all starts with questions, isn't it?
Yeah, back to questioning. I think if you've got 3 levels to this mental health conversation we're having, it's societal factors, mistrust, things we used to rely on for certainty, not so much anymore.
Yeah, less structures for sure.
COVID was a huge factor in that. Bigger worlds, more information, not being able to discern what's relevant to us, what's not. There is also identity crisis. Who am I? But if you don't decide who you are and where you're going,
you're going to struggle.
Yeah, like finding a sense of purpose in your life. And, we often find that it is a sense of purpose, like you said, like the social media lifestyle that people want sometimes. And you see, it's like, no, I often back that in my own life. It's like, wow, actually, I'm quite happy just like mowing my lawn and shoveling gravel all weekend. I didn't need to like jet off somewhere fancy to look cool. I was quite happy doing that, actually.
Yeah, I have no desire myself. It's the same. I kind of I want to like.
I quite like simple things. A bit of manual labor does it for me as well. I kind of like that. But it's like to decide who you are, what you value. Like these are all things we can look at as factors in mental health. Now, what does someone do listening to this? Like you said, just maybe ask those questions. Where am I? What am I doing? And listen to the feedback you get sometimes.
Yeah.
The other thing is maybe weigh up your information a bit better, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And the third thing is, I think, look at your level of mistrust sometimes, isn't it? And if you can't find certainty outside of yourself, it's where you need to find certainty in yourself. It comes back to identity.
Questioning isn't about mistrust as such. I think it's very easy to question every single thing you see, and you can easily get down that rabbit hole of I don't believe anything. Yeah. What you've got to do is just is view that. Try not to view it through your own lens. Try and look at a situation broadly. Look at it from above, the helicopter view, and say, does this feel real? Because most people's guts will take them in the right direction. Don't kind of obviously believe everything you read, but if you're going to question something, you don't have to mistrust everything. You just have to be selective.
And the way is to test it.
Yeah, test and
for
adjust.
A period of time, not just like once in many things, but it's like there's some fundamental laws you can't get away from. Drinking water is going to be good for you. You need to breathe. Like breathing's not good for me. It's like, no, the way you breathe is massive. Little things like that. But other stuff, it's like, well, let me try this on What do I get from it? How does it work for me?
Yeah.
It's that practical, real world application that's going to tell you. Like if people tell me a certain person is a terrible person, but I meet 10 people and they're amazing people, I might be like, oh, what? You know, if someone told me you were an absolute asshole is what I'm trying to say, and then I met you and went,
No, he really is.
no, he might go, God, he's a prick, isn't he? That's my experience. But if I was like, wow, he's such a cool bloke, like I'm gonna have a different perspective now. And it's like, I'm looking around my own world and trying to, that's all you can do, I think.
It really is. You've just got to, you've got to be open to the possibility that, people are good as well.
Yeah. So many good people.
I've seen it, in my own kind of post-stroke kind of journey is that, if you start to believe that people are against you, you can easily end up in a rabbit hole there. You know? And I've been helped by a huge swathe of different types of people, different colours, different creeds, different sexualities. All of those people did so out of probably, some of it was a sense of duty, some of it was their physical job to do, some of it was because they were just desperate to help me.
Yeah. I think if you look at human beings, from a human being to being thing, there is bad eggs across the world. Anyone who says there isn't is I think wishfully thinking.
You'd be a bit naive, wouldn't you?
A bit naive. There is people out there who aren't, would say, who are quite ill-intentioned. However, there's also a lot of people out there, human being to human being, you're like, when the chips are down, there's people around.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance between, when it comes to trust, because I've had times in my life where I've not trusted very many people.
Yeah.
And I've had times in my life where I've relied on, especially in the military, where I've relied on people for my life. When I've relied on people for making sure that a system on an aircraft is working, or whether I've been, in a dangerous situation. So you person to person, you rely on the guy next to you, especially when you're a military person. And
it must teach you a lot.
It really does.
We'll have to talk about it.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Let's talk about it. Right, folks, I enjoyed that about mental. And do you know why I enjoyed that about mental health? Because I get bored a little bit talking about water and cold baths, as you can tell. So it's like, oh, isn't it nice to talk about some bigger concepts?
But it's all about the baths. Don't listen to him.
It is, yeah. Just go sea dip it up. Everyone sea dipping's like, oh, what's your problem with sea dip? I was like, I love sea dipping, but don't expect it to solve your financial problems.
Especially as it's 2.5 hours
Unless you
away
find
from
some
me.
buried treasure in there.
Some of those rare Lego pieces.
It's not going to do it for you. Right, folks, I need a pee. Thank you very much. We're out. See you next time.